Hello and welcome to SPORTEL Plus eTalks. We are live from the Principality of Monaco. My name is Micheline. I'm Marketing and Communication Manager of SPORTEL, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's eTalks. Today, it's all about esports, and for the occasion, we partnered up with Esports Insider. So maybe we have some new faces in the crowd who are not familiar with SPORTEL. So just a couple of words of who we are and what we do. The SPORTEL convention was founded back in 1990 to bring media rights holders and broadcasters together. And today, more than 30 years later, we are still the home of the global media sports rights and tech industry. In recent times, digital has transcended traditional live sports, with the viewing experience shifting from linear to multi-platform and multi-screen. And that is why at SPORTEL, we continue to adapt and to grow our SPORTEL community. Our next physically live event will be SPORTEL Monaco, and it will be held from the 5th till the 7th of October. So if you want to meet or reconnect with the global decision makers and explore the latest trends and shift in the sports media and tech industry, then make sure to save the date and check www.sportelmonaco.com. Back to today's eTalks then, entirely dedicated to esports. Welcome to the ESI community and a big thanks to the entire ESI team for all their support. Also a massive thank you to my fabulous colleagues here at eTalks for putting these sessions. And a special thank you to Joanne Murchie, our Executive Conference Director, and our CEO, Laurent Pions, for enabling to produce this eTalks. Now, I'm not lying when I say that we have an awesome speaker lineup ready for you today. But first, let's take a look at the program of the day. In a minute, we'll start the first session on cultivating the crossover between traditional sports and esports. And then later, around 3 p.m., after a short break, we'll be back with the second session on broadcast and production opportunities in esports. A kind reminder to all of you to follow us on our social media channels and continue the conversation online by using the hashtag eTalks. So while you're all getting ready, I'm quickly going to run through some housekeeping rules. So we are using the Zoom platform. Feel free to use the chat box to share your comments. At the bottom of the toolbar, you can select panelists and attendees to share your message with everyone who is attending. So feel free to let us know where you're from and also share any comments or thoughts through the sessions over here. However, if you have a question, make sure to use the Q&A tab. And also good to know is that you can upvote existing questions. The questions with the most votes will be answered online at the end of each session by our moderator and our panelists. So now that you are aware of that, but before it's time to lead us into our first session, we have a quick poll for you. What we would like to know from you is, in which sport have you seen the best esport crossover so far? You can choose between football, American football, motorsports, or basketball. So let us know. We have about 3 seconds left to get these answers in. Personally, as a petrol head, I saw some pretty amazing crossovers in motorsports, but let us know what you preferred. So maybe we can already have the answers in. Let me see what you got. So we have about 34% who said football, very small percentage American football. Most of us relate with motorsports, 54%, and 8% saw a very good crossover in basketball. So I think that is food for thought for the first session of today. So now that everyone is ready, set and fired up, I would like to introduce you to the moderator, Mr. Sam Cooke. He is the managing director and co-founder of Esports Insider. So enjoy the session and I will be back right after. Sam, over to you after this short intro.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session of SPORTEL today. So yeah, first off, thank you very much to SPORTEL for inviting me here today and for partnering with us at Esports Insider. So a little bit more about me and about ESI. My name's Sam Cooke. I'm MD and co-founder at Esports Insider. We're based in London and we're an esports business focused media company, agency and events company too. So I would like to now invite the panelists to join me and we shall get started. We have today, here they all are. We have Mr. Nicolas Maurer, the CEO at Team Vitality. We have Hannah Brown from Formula E. We have Magnus, forgive me, I've known you for ages, but I've never attempted to pronounce your surname, and I'm not going to start now. But we have Magnus from the Esports Entertainment Group, and we have Romain Bigeard from RIOT Games, another name I probably just butchered. But I will let all of my panelists introduce themselves. They probably know themselves better than I know them. So Nico, over to you, mate. We'll get started.
Hello, Sam. Hello, everyone. I'm Nicolas Maurer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Team Vitality. Team Vitality is the biggest French esports organization and one of the biggest in Europe. We operate on 8 different games and notably in League of Legends in the LEC, where I have the pleasure to work with my friend Romain here today.
Perfect crossover then. Romain, over to you.
Perfect. Hi, Romain Bigeard. I work for the LEC, for RIOT Games, more precisely. I've been doing esports for a lot of years. I worked on the team side, on the sponsor side, and now my job is connected to the monetization of our ecosystem, which start to be quite big because LoL is an old esport title.
Wonderful. Thank you, Romain. Perfect. And Hannah, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I seem to have done the poorest job of my background, so I do apologise for that. I'm Hannah Brown. I look after strategy and business development at Formula E. Formula E, for those of you who aren't aware, is going to its 7th season of racing. We're actually in Rome for our 3rd and 4th leg of our season 7 this weekend, which is great. And we are the all-electric World Championship motorsport series. And yeah, delighted to be with you all here today.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I've never had the chance to go to a Formula E, but I really, really want to. I missed the Berlin one by like a week when I was there once, and it was very annoying. And yeah, background-wise, don't worry. I just have this on because it covers the corner of my bed and my wardrobe, so you're fine. And Magnus, over to you, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name is Magnus Leppäniemi, and I'm the president of esports at Esports Entertainment Group. And for you who don't know what Esports Entertainment Group is, we are an esports and a gambling company there, and we also listed on the NASDAQ there. And we have an iGaming division that has licenses to operate in New Jersey, in Malta, license, also UK and Ireland. And we also have an esports betting brand called Vi. And within the esports division that I'm running, we have 4 companies. We have EGL, the Electronic Gaming League. We have Genny Analytics. We have GG Circuit and also Helix Gaming Centers in there. So that's a part of a company there.
Indeed, thank you, Magnus. You've been making some very big moves in the past year, which we'll talk about during this panel. So yeah, first up, I think it was motorsports, right, that won the poll. But the first up for each of the panelists, I would like to ask you each to name a best practice example of a sports and esports crossover. So that can be anything, right? Like we've seen, for me, I'm a football fan. UK football, that is. The US, I've tried the NFL, it's just it's not for me. But we've seen plenty of football teams come in and do a good job, right? And football teams approach esports in a different way. From PSG, I think, being kind of the shining light. But we've seen some other great examples across different sports, whether that's individual campaigns, running their own tournaments, you name it, right? But yeah, if we could go around and everyone say just one that they've liked and why they've liked it. Magnus, you're still on my screen, mate. So if you want to start, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can start. I want to highlight, I think, what DreamHack Sporters have been doing since 2018 together with the. Actually, it's going back to football there, or soccer, depend, of course, where you're based in the world here. But that's what I think we're doing there, where they took that e-Superliga and created something that's actually interesting for the fans. It also actually engages with the teams there also. I think that, and they've been running that since 2018. And I think it's going into the 4th season there. They not created something esport wise that works, but also created content format that works on traditional TV or traditional sports channels that's kinder. So it's not that traditional esport event you go to CSGO event and that takes you 10 to 12 hours that we used to. They actually created something that lasts for only maybe 3 or 4 hours. That's more consistent with, as I said, the Premier League where matches that thing. So that's what I like. I think they got something on there, and I saw they have expanded into NHL. So I think that's good. So I think that's one of the things I want to highlight in this session.
Yeah, super cool, right? Because I mean, for those who don't know, I'm not sure when DreamHack Sports itself got started. Maybe like 2 years ago. 2018, so about a couple of years ago. But DreamHack itself as a company has been around since '94, if I'm right.
1994 in a small school cafeteria in a small city in out of northern part of Sweden. It's crazy.
Like Jönköping, right? Was that what Jönköping was the first?
No, I actually was. Can't remember the name now. No, Jönköping was where I ended. That they came there in 2001, something like that.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. So 1994 was Malung was the name of that, and then they went to Borlänge, and then so it's been an amazing journey. What DreamHack has done, of course. I mean, I'm a former DreamHack, so it's close to my heart in that case.
Yeah,
of course. So, but DreamHack Sport is something that spun off in 2018 to really work with the sports franchises. They also create some other content from that not traditionally esport things there. So I think I like what they're doing there, and the team they build up that's based out of Denmark actually, and not in Sweden.
Yeah, super. I think super cool to see a company like that, like one of the more historic esports gaming companies, really focus on the sports play.
Yeah.
Nico, how about you? Any cool examples that you can come up with and talk us through?
I think there are plenty of examples, but since you're a football fan, I want to make you happy. So I go for another football example. In France, the French Football Federation worked with all of the other European football federations to create what they call the E-Nations Cup. And it was very interesting because they wanted to replicate kind of a European championship, but on FIFA. So they went to us, and notably my partner and co-founder Vitality, Neo, to be the French coach, a national coach. So he had to do a nationwide selection of the best talent, and then they went to train at Clairefontaine, which is the center where the French football team trains and operate. The actual football team, national team, and they spent 2 weeks there creating a lot of content using the same facility as the football players and preparing for that European championship that they eventually won. So that was a very interesting way to connect the dots. And it was well done because, and I want to point to that because a lot of bodies from traditional sport are not always understanding the specificities of e-sport. And I think in that case, they talked to the experts in the field to make sure they understood the way it's supposed to be done. And it was a good product with good viewership, with a good interaction between the expertise of the French Federation and the e-sport people. So very good crossover in my view.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I really liked that one as well. I was trying to think, there's so many footballers now, right, who have either launched their own team or are involved in esports in some way. But from the French team, Griezmann currently has his own team, right?
Exactly, Grizzly Esports with his smaller brother operating the team. So he's a fan of esports. So that's good because it attracts some attention, more mainstream exposure to esport. So that's good to see more people joining the field.
Indeed. We've got David Beckham over here, right? He was my era, so.
So you're a Guild fan now?
I have to be, mate. I've got the Vitality jersey hanging up, Nico, just there on the door. I promise.
Cool.
And Hannah, how about you? Any cool examples that you've seen from your experience working in the space so far?
Yeah, like I could be a bit broader because I think it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. As we know, esports I think is a broadly used term and can sometimes get a bit confused about its application. And obviously most of esports happens in big strategy-based games and it has a very specific audience and people know where that audience largely exists. When it comes to motorsport's interesting, right? Because it's as high fidelity as you get, like sitting behind a simulator is as close as you get to driving a real car versus really any other sport. But when it comes to the number of people that, participate in online gaming, you've got the universes like that, you know, strategy-based games make up pretty much 95% of it. Sports gaming is the rest. And of that, a lot of that is football, is soccer, and then everyone else is competing for a very small slice of the pie. So when we were thinking about esports, we were more thinking about, especially with COVID, and I'm sure we'll come on to some of this stuff a bit later, but around like kind of broadcast replacement content, which allowed our, you know, our drivers and our teams, our sponsors to get involved, to kind of create content that we could give to platforms and we could engage people in our story. I'm not necessarily sure that's esports, but, you know, in my mind, it's more kind of broadcast replacement, albeit you have got this kind of opportunity that you could, in theory, no one's yet quite done it, but take someone from high fidelity simulator based racing into real racing, and we can come on to that in a bit more detail. But, you know, then you go to the other end, which is non-formalized and not organized, which is, you know, the England cricket players while they're stuck in their hotel rooms playing, you know, Call of Duty. And if you're thinking about esports as a way for traditional sports to connect with younger fans, then, you know, what the players go and do, probably nothing to do. They're not going and playing online cricket matches. They're going and playing Call of Duty, and Ben Stokes and whoever else is kind of potentially building and reaching an audience with different people who engage with Call of Duty. And who knows over the next 10 or 15 years how that plays out with translation of audience. So I think there has been some really great broadcast replacement products. We did one, Formula One did one. You guys have alluded to football, and, you know, the Premier League did their tournament. But I think the success comes when it's quite authentic and the players or the teams or whoever is involved really get involved and do something which feels meaningful, which is why people like watching Lando Norris, because he's got a character. You know, we've got Daniel Apt, who's, you know, has got a tone of voice, you know, he's got a tone of voice with a gaming community that people resonate with. So it's how you connect the two together and make it meaningful, I think, is where the success has come. And I think we're very early days in terms of where we see this, you know, developing and driving real value back to, you know, brands and franchises, etc. Yeah,
I 100% agree on that. I mean, I think you can tell, right? And audiences can tell and fans can tell if something is forced. And like, there's plenty of esports out there to get sports stars and to get sports involved in. Like, for anyone, again, I'm just going to keep referencing it, but for any football fans watching, Neymar's actually really good at CSGO. Right? You got to sign him up, Nico. And Neymar's actually really good at CSGO, and CSGO is already hugely popular. I mean, that's probably why CSGO is already hugely popular in Brazil. Obviously, he's pretty well liked in Brazil as well, for obvious reasons. So like, there's so much that can be done with focusing on what sports stars and sports entities, what they already play a lot of video games, right? It's just finding out how we can bring that in and how we can do nice crossovers. You know, I'm always really keen, I always bring this up on sports panels. I'm a bit of a boxing fan as well. And the Fight Night game from years ago, Fight Night game was excellent. But we need a new Fight Night game, and then that esports era can begin. But Romain, how about you, sir? In terms of practical examples, you've been around the esports space for a long while, so I'm sure you've seen some.
For a bit now, and I think it's fascinating to see how sports and esports are getting closer and closer from one another. I think there's a lot of things to learn from one to the other. There are also some really big some really big differences between the both. So I really liked Anna's answer to frame a bit the current context. My example, I actually wanted to talk a bit about team vitality. It's good that Nico is here. I think they are doing a really job from a training perspective and from a business perspective at understanding what worked in sport and trying to get some of the successful guys into their own structure. I have in mind Mathieu Péchet, ex-Olympian in canoë, Bruno Martini, the partnership they did with Renault in Formula One, the training camps they have in Stade de France. I think even better than publisher, teams are the best suited because they understand influencers, they understand how the business work, and I think they are in the strongest position to create those bridges between sports and esports. So yeah, kudos to Nico and the team, because I think on the French market they are doing a really, really good job.
For sure, yeah, no, I completely agree with that point as well about it being easiest, I guess, for the teams, or it makes the most sense, and teams have the most capacity to work with sports, whether that's individual sports stars, athletes and such, or entities, right? Of course, because teams are across games. So again, to the point earlier, CS, League, Vitality are operating both. And I think, Nico, you're in 9 games now, I want to say.
8 actually, but 9 teams because we have 2 teams in the league. We participate in LEC, but also in the French league, the LFL.
Yeah, exactly. So across games, right? And Nico, we'll move on to that. Actually, it's quite a nice transition to one of my first questions, which was for you. In terms of integrating sports stars and athletes into the workings of an esports org, like we can, I suppose, like anyone, right, can make an announcement and get a bit of PR attention, and that's great. But in terms of the actual day-to-day and how you work together with them, if you could tell us a bit more about how Vitality has done, is doing that, and wants to do that as well, that'd be great.
I think you're perfectly right. First of all, I think it's kind of the trending way to do things, to say, yeah, I'm adding this sports guy, this former coach, blah, blah, blah. And that's good, but that's just most of the time PR, as you're pointing out correctly. I think that comes from the history of Astralis, having the former goalkeeper of the handball team from Denmark, overseeing all of the performance operation at Astralis in Counter-Strike, with the huge success being one of the elements turning the team into the most successful team in CSGO of all time. So everyone wanted to replicate that, but not really thinking about what it means in practice. So for us, obviously, it was interesting. It's been a while that we're looking at integrating sports expertise for a lot of reasons. The bigger one, I would say, is that the way esports training progressed is super slow and comes from, I'd say, bad habits of the fact that a few years back, players were on their own, creating their own practice regimen, which was basically play, and sometimes sleep. So there was not a lot of thoughts put into how can we train more efficiently? How can we integrate other components in our training rather than just play the game? And we saw that, like many teams in the space, in air, it's so basic the way they train.
It was
doesn't
almost,
mean they are not super
sorry
talented.
To jump in quickly, Element. I can't remember who it was, and I wouldn't name them obviously, but one of the Overwatch League team coaches was quoted in a fairly big media outlet as bragging about the fact that the players were training for like 14 hours a day at times or something ludicrous, and it was like a badge of honor. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, but it used to be at a time where there was not a lot of structure and infrastructure on the players. So, but it's kind of obvious that when you train 14 hours, you cannot be focused that long in a day. That just doesn't work. So you don't see the improvement you could see if you do differently. So, like many teams, we saw that was not, let's say, really a good way of training. So. In the esports history, then teams started to add more coaches. That was the first step. And then it was not only the individual talent plus the collective talent of playing together. It was also, how do you prepare? And with the coach, how do you prepare for your opponent? How do you work on a specific play style? Or do you repeat training, blah, blah. So that was the first step. But then everyone, at least in the professional sphere, got equipped with coach. Then you had assistant coaches, analysts, so more and more infrastructure around. But that still was in a culture of the same ways of training that we used to do 5 years ago. So again, playing a training game against other teams, and that's it. So we also we're seeing that it could be improved in a lot of different ways. So our idea was to go away from the traditional model of players either being in gaming houses, which means training and living in the same place, which is obviously not healthy. You don't want to live with your colleagues. It just doesn't work. That sometimes work when you win, but as soon as the team start losing, you can imagine the mood of living all together. That's not very healthy. So we wanted to separate the training place from their living space, and so they could have their own space. So we wanted to shift and just have the training center model where the player could just wake up, prepare, and go to work, do their work there with the right coaches around them, and then go back home. And that's it. So Stade de France was this idea, but what we loved was also the fact that Stade de France is an iconic place in France. For every Frenchman that witnessed the win in the World Cup in football in 1998, it's a special place for all of us, and it's the temple of sports in France. So being able to partner with Stade de France, that is such a big place for traditional sport, is huge in terms of the story we wanted to tell, but also benefiting from their expertise and bringing our own infrastructure and people coming from sport, as Romain and you mentioned. We had Thierry Assion working for us. He's the coach of Jo Wilfried Tsonga in tennis. We have Mathieu Péché, a former world champion in canoe, that is now the manager of the CSGO team. We have Bruno Martini overseeing all the performance. So he's a former goalkeeper of the French handball team. I could say we've done the same as Astralis in that regard. So that's the first part, bring those people. But it's super important to understand that they cannot just replicate the formula they had in sports, because of the culture of where the background of esports player, when they come from, and especially referencing to the older players. Because if you look at the younger players, you can model them in the right structure because they don't know anything about professional level in esports. So you can give them the good codes and reflexes and create the right thing. But for the older players that used to win way before we even enter the space, it's not easy to say to them and to tell them, hey, you should do differently. Because for some players, they will just say, yeah, but man, I won majors in CSGO and you were not even in esports. So you have to make sure they buy into the process and they see the improvement it can create, and they can see why the way we want to train and the structure we want to put is eventually helping them and helping the team. So there's a process of changing the mindset of some older players, and it takes time, and you cannot just come from sport and say that will happen this way suddenly. It's a gradual process which takes a lot of time, education, energy, and that's what the people that we're bringing in are doing. So it takes a lot of time, but we see the improvements. And for example, in CSGO, we are one of the best teams in the world since 2 years and continually improving. So we see the results. So it's not only players' talent, but also everything we're building around that.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a great answer, man. I mean, exactly that. And like the proof is in the pudding, right? It's hard to convince people to change and break habits when, as you say, especially if they've been winning. But there's plenty of learnings that can be made from the sports world and from experts for sure. And there's also for anyone listening, if you're ever in Paris or if you live in Paris, the V Hive is you're open to stop by for a coffee yet, Nico? Or?
Yeah, but not right now, unfortunately.
Not right now, of course. Yeah. Oh, France.
It's the time we are living in,
soon.
So it's closed. But when it happens, everyone is welcome. For sure.
There we go. And Romain, over to you for this one, because this was a question I was really keen to hear from you on. In terms of so Riot Games, right? Numerous games now, but League of Legends being the most historic esports title under the Riot banner. I wanted to ask how, I suppose, first of all, how are and how can Riot, at least with League specifically, work with sports entities and for the World Championships? So for anyone listening who's unaware, the League of Legends World Championships is the pinnacle, the big event in the League of Legends esports calendar, and it is. I've never actually been to one, but it is amazing. Everything I've seen it's a spectacle, right? I wanted to ask, did Riot kind of look to any sports properties like when I think of football in the Champions League, like the music plays in my head, right? Or when Anthony Joshua, I remember watching him fight in Hamburg, I think it was, and he walked out and there was fire everywhere and super over the top. But it's cool. But yeah, how can League of Legends work with sports entities? Question one, I suppose. And as a follow-up for the World Championships, were there any events you look to in sports for inspiration?
Perfect. I do recommend to attend the World Final. It's quite unbelievable to see a full stadium with esports fans. I wanted first to spend a bit of time to try to explain a bit what's behind the word esport. The same way when you say I work in sport, it can mean a lot of things. Maybe you belong to the German Ministry of Sport, maybe you do curling in the middle of Mexico, maybe you do volleyball in India. So it could be really, really different worlds and topics. Same when you talk about esport. And Anna was touching a bit on it earlier. You have a lot of games, a lot of tournaments, a lot of competition. So for the esport I'm going to talk about, it's the one connected to League of Legends, which is the current biggest esport title, mostly because it's present everywhere around the world. And we have leagues which goes really deep. So we have a world championship every year. We have continental leagues, we have local leagues, we have leagues per country, we have university leagues. And so we have internally a full department dedicated to make sure all those leagues interact between one another. And also we need a lot of people to make sure those leagues are running everywhere around the world. So and I think we have a lot of similarities with sports, especially when it comes to performance, the idea to perform, educating the young, self-improvement for the pro players, entertainment, really, really important, competitive integrity, because like having as few luck as possible in a game, so the skill can prevail. So I think those shared value are really strong and common between sport and esport. We also have some strong differences, and the main one I wanted to emphasize is the IP of an esport title is controlled by a company, usually a game publisher, and it's really different from sports. If you want to organize a football tournament in your garden, technically you can. I don't know if a lot of pro players will attend, but you can. If you want to organize a League of Legends tournament in your garden without any Riot Games authorization, you're going to struggle because you need to use a software, which is ours. And the way we deal with this software is it's regularly updated. Every 2 weeks, we have not a new version of the game, but we modify like 1 or 2%, which is something which doesn't happen in sport. We are, at least from a Riot side compared to other esports, hands deep in the structuration of the league. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure our esport ecosystem makes sense on a world scale level. We also, that means we are in charge of creating the broadcast. We are in charge of sponsor integrations, of business, of leading the relationship with our teams. And usually most of the publishers now don't have just one esport title. They have 1, 2, 3, 4. From our side, we now have like 2 or 3. So we can learn from one games to carry on this knowledge into the other to make sure we don't do the mistakes we did in the past. And from the area, we can really learn from sport. I would identify business. I mean, the sport industry has been monetizing itself really well for now years and years. So we have a few things to learn there. How do you exist in the mainstream ecosystem? How do you build a relationship with local governments? How do you deal with international paperwork? How do you deal with media and media rights and stuff like that? All those stuff we can learn from sports. But yeah, so I think it's fascinating because we've so many common points and common ground, but at the same time, we're really different, really different, and it's fascinating to see both evolving. And to answer more specifically on the World Championship question, esport is not just performance; it's also entertainment. And most of our ecosystem is online. Like esport doesn't really have frontiers, doesn't really have boundaries outside of the server. It's really hard for a European guy to play with a Chinese guy due to internet, but like in Europe, it doesn't matter if you're French, Czech, and Portuguese playing on the same team. So we are really international, and entertainment is a huge part of our industry, especially when we decide to go on offline finals. And those finals, at least for League of Legends, they have to be really special for the fans, because we are talking to our most crazy and best fan ready to commit a full weekend to go watch some League of Legends in a stadium. So those events need to be really special, especially the World Championship, which is the end of the season in November. So we are working with professionals coming from the real world industry, you know, like the guy behind the broadcast at the beginning of League of Legends used to work on the Olympic opening ceremonies on NASCAR, and he created everything there. And we are trying to inspire ourselves from any event available outside with how we use AR, for example. We had a final with a live dragon coming in the middle of the stadium, which you could see only if you were on the stream. For the finals, we have crossover campaigns. Like you're gonna see like real singer on stage, and half of them are gonna be AR, so only available for the people watching online. And at the same time, in the game, we are launching a campaign with skins and everything. So I think the next step for esports is to keep pushing this online versus offline capabilities. And yeah, it's cool. I love our industry.
Yeah, I mean, that we could do a whole panel, I think, on how Riot Games and League of Legends integrate music, right? We could do a whole panel just on that. It's super.
We have a full department just for it.
Exactly. I didn't know that about the broadcast person as well. That's super cool. But I would say as well, for anyone considering going, like for me, like I alluded to it earlier, like I'm not a big NFL fan, but like I've gone to an NFL game and had a really good time, right? Because you're in and out, and it's the sport is the core and center of it, but it's not the be all and end all of the event, if you will. Like I haven't been to the World Championships yet, and obviously the Dota 2, so another game, and a big event in Dota 2 was here in the UK not too long ago, in Birmingham actually, completely sold out as well. I think it was the fastest selling Dota 2 major, at least at the time. Maybe that's been beaten since. But I'm not a big Dota 2 fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I went and it was a fantastic event. And again, it's the spectacle of the event, right? And what Riot Games do with the World Championships is the very pinnacle of that, in my opinion, in esports. Must be fun to work on, Romain, I'm sure. But Hannah, hearing from you if we can, because great to have you here as well as someone from the sports side, right? Coming into esports more. If I could ask, how long has esports been on the agenda at Formula E, and how was it first approached, and has that changed since in terms of the thinking? If you could just talk a little bit about that would be great.
I mean, probably like carrying on from what I said earlier. I mean, I think we're all very early days in this. I mean, Formula E is young. We're, as I said, going into our 7th season of racing, and Formula E from its inception had this kind of gaming type approach. So, you know, we've got features like Fan Boost, where fans can vote for their favorite driver and give them a bit more energy. You know, attack mode, where the drivers have got to drive over a certain part of the track and they get a bit more energy. They're managing their overall amount of energy that they have from the powertrain over the course of the race. So Formula E naturally has got some kind of gaming type elements, and because of we race in city centres, our ticket price is lower. We tried to keep the content format quite short. Our audience also skews a bit more young, a bit younger and a little bit more urban. So kind of gaming has always been in the kind of Formula E DNA, if you like, from the beginning. As I said, how you really cross over to a gaming audience, I think it's really interesting to hear like Romain's and Nicolas's observations around what esports has learned from real sport or from traditional sport, because as spectacles, as Romain said, they're very similar. People train really hard, they care about the outcome, there are rules and regulations, fans really engage in something they watch. And so how you produce a Counter-Strike championship and how you produce a Champions League final, like there can be lots of great crossovers, right, in terms of fan experience, how you produce content, creating unique match day or event day experiences. I think what a lot of sports have done, if they look at these really big young audiences in esports, and be like, oh, it would be really great to have a bit of that. And I think figuring out how those two things kind of overlap, is interesting. From Formula E's perspective, and again, talked about a bit earlier about, car racing in a game, whether it's a Mario Kart or it's a R-Factor simulator, there's the kind of crossover in some of the kind of motor skills and the general challenge of what you're trying to achieve during the game. So Formula E's approach from the beginning was, we'll integrate our IP into a number of games, both on kind of mobile basis, console basis, etc., and PC games. So whether it's into Asphalt or whether it's into real racing or iRacing, you can go in there and you can pick a Formula E experience, deliveries, etc., and you can play the game. So it's kind of like a marketing activity. I'm in that game, I see the cool stuff around Formula E. Like how we think about understanding who's playing those games and how we create some interesting experiences that they then might make the jump or the transition, say, well, I kind of play in this game and I quite like it. I'm now going to come and get more involved in the racing and learn a bit more about who the drivers are and who my favorite team is, etc. So I think we're pretty early on that journey. And then the kind of high fidelity simulator racing stuff, we've always, if you go to a Formula E race, which by the way, I've worked for Formula E for 12 months and I've not yet been to a race with fans because of the nature of the time that we've been in, that spent an awful lot of time looking at this computer. When you go to a Formula E race, there's a gaming zone and there are simulators there. And so we've always lent into that type of experience, and the drivers there'll be like a bit of a competition and the drivers will come down and play with some fans, etc. So there's always been that kind of relationship between the event day experience, the drivers, and gaming. And so when COVID hit, it felt like a good opportunity to say, right, let's go and do this kind of broadcast replacement product. We did it turns out simulator drivers are a lot better in a simulator than real drivers are, so you couldn't put them up against each other because they would completely smash the real drivers. So we ran 2 grids, and because Formula E is younger and we've got this quite a familial, the teams are really engaged, and whether it's Mercedes or Porsche or whether it's some of the independent teams or Mahindra, our Indian manufacturer, like these teams have made a choice to be in Formula E because they believe in the future, they believe in electrification, they believe in the next generation. And so their drivers and the kind of way that, I'm not saying that, you know, we all get a hard time from our various stakeholders about what they do and don't want to do, but I think we're probably the only sport where every single athlete involved in the sport got involved in the virtual series. So all 24 of our drivers drove on this virtual grid for 8 races through the summer. And then when we did the next iteration, so we've created a standalone brand called Formula E Accelerate, which we've just done the first season of that, which just completed 10 days ago. And we did 6 races. And what we did out of both the one we did in the summer, which we called Race at Home, and Formula E Accelerate, is, you know, the winning drive. They've got a prize pool, but they also, we're going to give the winning driver the chance to come and drive a real life Formula E car. So,
oh, nice.
You know, we're really early days on the journey. We want to try and create that pathway where we link the real drivers to the simulators, and we link the simulator drivers to the real thing, and how we get better, whether it's in, at some point in the future, Formula E has a game of its own, like maybe in mobile, that instead of just being a third-party integration of someone else's game, how we can like start to drive these links like much more authentically, and you can start to imagine where you've played the game, you voted for Lucas de Grassi and Fan Boost, you know, you bought a cat.
It's linked to the event days as well. If you're there, you get something special. There's so much that can be done there, right?
Yeah,
I think it's super cool. Like with the, I think with the more casual, like it doesn't have to be like Formula E or sports organization partners with esports tournament organizer or whatever, right? It can be more casual than that as well. Like I'm trying to think of some of the races, but Sam Bird is one that is in my head. Is he still good?
Actually, but that's a great example where, like, for Accelerate, we did the drivers in Diria, we did set them up into like 12 drivers on each grid, and they did a race and we broadcast that, which is great. But you know, we then got like the likes of Sam Bird, who was really good, came in and did co-commentary. Like our ability to play with stuff because it's a bit more agile. So, you know, like I've seen on the participants here, we've got Ben Achilles. So we used the business that they've launched called Sport Buff, which allowed people to come and vote and interact on the feed. We put that on Twitch. We got some co-streamers in Latin America that actually did really well. They took the feed and they had a bit of fun with it. So our chance to experiment and see where audiences might come from and give fans, you know, we did, you know, fun things in the summer, like you know, an online trophy competition, and we let fans go out there and design the trophy, and then we got it made.
Yeah.
You know, so we're just,
I mean, there's so much that can be done there, right? And like whether, I mean, I have no idea if he is, but let's say Sam Bird is a League of Legends fan, and if Sam Bird also becomes and is into the streaming himself on Twitch, and then streams some casual League of Legends sometimes, but people know him as Sam Bird, the Formula E driver that also likes League. There's that like the cross-pollination and like the crossover of interests, right? That can be better cultivated and better pushed. I mean, like we had a panel at one of our events last week on chess and like the growth of explosion, to be honest, of chess, and how a lot of esports teams are signing chess players now. So they, I use the example of TSM quite often, like Team Solo Mid. They have their quite an old org. They have their professional teams and players, and they have their streamers separately to that, right? And on their streamers now is Nakamura, who's I don't know chess too well, but I'm told he's pretty good. And he will stream himself, obviously, to people that want to watch chess, but also they will see on a lot of his streams that he's affiliated with TSM. And so then if you're a Nakamura chess fan, maybe, and you like a bit of one of the esports games, then maybe TSM becomes your team. And there's so much more that can be done. Like Magnus, I'll bring you here.
Just one comment on that is I think you touched on it, is you can come up with all these concepts, but you do fundamentally need to like have engaging personalities that engage fans and people care about it. I might not like watching the streamer on Twitch and got no idea what it's going on about, but him or her have got a whole bunch of fans that really love them and get engaged in what they're doing. And I think, one of our observations is, some of the characters that come through the stuff are just not that marketable, and they're quite hard to, drive real interest in. So, and similarly, the sports stars that get it right, using, Lando Norris or Daniel Abt or someone as an example, some of the other more traditional ones would be like, we don't, they could be a bit jealous of that. Be like, but they put a lot of effort into it and they engage that audience. And I use Ben Stokes as an example with with Call of Duty. I have no idea if Ben Stokes, the result of that, is attracting more fans. I think it's just in their rooms, but it'd be interesting to see over time, does there become a set of fans who get interested in cricket because these guys like playing Call of Duty in their hotel room? I don't know. But
exactly. And it's hard to track things like that, right? In terms of how that prove of ROI or tracking that, I don't know, but it seems obvious or sensible that makes sense, and there's a lot of opportunity there. But I've always thought, like, I don't know, tennis, for example. Like, would Rafael Nadal would Djokovic be a good a good Twitch streamer? I don't know. But it's interesting. I think more and more sports stars, we see it, right? Like the likes of Dele Alli and the younger players coming through. Dele Alli's partnered with HyperX, for example. HyperX sponsor a fair few footballers and sports stars now, alongside a lot of esports entities. But yeah, Magnus, because I'm conscious of time as well, I'll bring you in here if I may. And so Esports Entertainment Group well, I've lost count, to be honest with you, of the amount of partnerships with sporting organizations. So the Denver Broncos, for example, was the latest partnership, right? Yeah. If you could talk to some of those a little bit, like what's the approach and what's the thinking with those?
Yeah, as I said, it's actually 9 announcements. We're working together with 9 teams. As I said, Denver Broncos was the latest one we announced. We also then have partnership with the Eagles, the New England Patriots, Baltimore Ravens, and LA Galaxy and Philly Union, MLS teams, and LA Kings and NHL teams there. And we've seen that, as I said, the approach we have is partnerships with these teams. I mean, we have to go back to the pandemic when that hit last year. They saw that all the games were canceled. They didn't have any interaction with the fans. They also losing fans that are somewhere between 80 to 35. How can we reach them? And as I said, all these star players, when they went onto the bubble, if they were the NBA in Florida, if it was the NHL in Hamilton, they all get out of their like private airplanes under their arms. They didn't have the suitcases. Actually, gaming rig and their monitor, and went in there and started playing video games. That's what these guys do. So I think there's a cross section that it's really interesting. And for the partnerships we have with this team is actually create fan engagements for them. So we're not coming from that professional thing. We're actually coming from the grassroots here, because we have sports fans that play video games. How do we engage with them? So we're creating tournaments that you play for your team. So you come and play Eagles tournaments and you can win Eagle prizes. And the thing is, you're not here to play for $250 or $1,000, whatever that can be. That's not engaging. We're actually playing for prices that you can't buy. If that's actually 2 hours of playing video games with your favorite star, or maybe it's you can fly with the team to an away game and be at the owner's box and then have all the excitement of going back. Those kind of things we think is more engaging, and people that engage it to the fans. And that's also what we're working with the teams did, because they like that. It also creates engagement for them. And I think also so that's all the tournaments there. And of course, we're monetizing this. We think there is ways to monetize that. You talked about the sponsorships. I mean, HyperX is going into that. We can see more. They want to kind of coming for DreamHack. We've seen that all that kind of hardcore esport fans is really tapped into it. But the casual fans is so much bigger gaming you can do there. I think in HyperX has started that one. I think they already own that kind of the esport hardcore fans. So how can they branch out to other things? So that's where I think there's a possibility to do that. And I think with all the teams we started talking about, when they go back to their part and say, hey, we're going to run esport tournaments, all partners going to jump and say, hey, we want to be that. We want to be a part of that. So that's the interesting thing there. So for us, it's of course, we have EGL, who is our tournament platform that will run these tournaments. We will do, of course, broadcast also. And everything starts at home, depending where the pandemic is. We're going to start at home. And then, of course, we want to give some experience. So when we come down to maybe the final 16, we take them down to the stadium. Maybe there's the suite you're playing for, or maybe you take the final game down at the field to give it kind of experience. So that's what it's all about. It's all about that kind of fan engagement experience we're doing there. And of course, what's in it for us? Running tournaments, getting more people to sign up, of course. But also we have other things we want to talk with the teams about. Tournament is the first and also was the easiest way in. But then we also have Helix with big gaming centers. If you look at the partnership we have with the Denver Broncos, we actually got a gaming center at the Patriots Place. That's one of the first. It's 14,000 square feet, 150 computers. That fills their time when there's no games. People come to the station, there's food and beverages and all those kind of things. So that creates that. So that's a part where we also talk to the teams to create the gaming center, because that could also act as for the players to come down after practice to, play video games together before they leave and go home. So there's a lot of things that creates. And then, of course, for us, it's also a way to upsell to other products that we have. We're going to launch a skill betting platform called LandDuel later on. So that's we can upsell that because we know these people like to compete, and they will probably want to compete with other things there, and they will be able to sell that. So those are the things that we see in these partnerships for us to monetize, but also engage with the fans in there. I think that's been esports, is how do you actually monetize the fans? And we think this is a way to do that, so to say.
Yeah, that also brings us perfectly in transition wise to some of the audience questions as well, Magnus. I mean, yeah, I think, and what you were saying as well, I fully agree with. I think I remember reading articles, not so much now, I guess, but a couple of years ago about should traditional sports be scared of esports? Like, are they going to be replaced? Like, no, of course not. But
no.
It's like complementary to one another, right? And there's ways that they can work together quite nicely.
I think, I mean, as I see, if you look at the players today, I mean, all this, and if the NBA players, NFL players, they play video games. It's a part of it. They didn't choose just to go esports or gaming. They actually do both of things, and that's what I think. Especially as they come from Sweden, they think it's so big difference. You either do that, you play video games, or you play football. You can actually do both, and the kids, they do that today. They want to be good at both things there. I think we just need to make sure that we take that esports part serious, because it is serious for people to do that. They love to compete. They think it's important. I mean, you don't tell anybody. I mean, if somebody's playing football outside, you don't scream, "Hey, you need to end the game." It's like, come in and have dinner when the match is ready. But when it's playing League of Legends, it's like you say, "Hey, it's food. You gotta come eat dinner." And they're like, "No, I can't. I need to do that." Then the parents go and unconnect the internet and say, "Hey, it's got to come now." They don't really understand that. So I think parents need to understand what esports is or gaming is and how important it is for the young generation today also. Exactly.
I think that's largely generational, right? Having not grown up with it, like gaming has come such a long way in such a short time. Someone asked the other day, and it was like, "What game did you first play?" And I remember playing like the massive Game Boy, right? That the old grey one, and that was the first gaming console, whatever you want to call it, I played, and we've come a fairly long way since then. But yeah, for the questions, because I've realised we're long left. So this open to anyone. What do the panel see as the key crossover opportunities between esports and traditional sports with regards to their fan and audience engagement? So what can one learn from the other? I mean, I'd dangle one here, which is some teams recently have begun to, not many to be fair, but some teams have begun to launch fan membership schemes, right? So Team Liquid have Liquid Plus, and I think it's an annual fee, which you fans will get certain perks, certain bits of content, etc., that non-members don't get. So that's one way, I guess, which is fairly standard in sports. But yeah, open anyone to the panel. Nicolas, maybe you want to jump on that.
I think it's interesting because when you look at what's the average monetization per fan in an esports team, it's way lower than in an actual sports team for very good reason. And part of it is that we don't have match their revenue. Okay, admittedly, the clubs don't have that right now, but in the model, they obviously monetize very well. Let's say the Saturday game, when you sell the tickets, you monetize people going to the stadium, buying merchandise, food, blah, blah, blah. So all of that revenue doesn't exist. We also miss a good chunk of the media rights revenue that is starting to develop, and it's growing fast, but still it's nowhere near what exists in traditional sports. So we need to find new ways to monetize. We cannot just replicate the sports model because we miss parts of those monetization, those ways of monetizing. So we, as an esports team owner, we need to think about new ways. One of those ways could be, how do we monetize fan engagement through loyalty programs? There can be a variety of other initiatives, but what I want to say here is that we can expect to see esports team innovating in that front, direct monetization of the fans, and then doing things that maybe some sports team will eventually replicate. Other example could be what's happening right now with the NFT craze. As esports team, we're born in the digital tools. That's the way we operate in the digital space. So it's likely that we are faster to pick up on those new revenue opportunities, and then maybe the traditional sports club would replicate that. But in a way, we have to innovate because there is no existing sustainable model for top esport organization right now. So we need to all try, innovate, go in new direction. And that's what I expect to see from the esports team in the next few years. A lot of different initiatives. Some will stick, some will fail, but eventually we'll see new ways of monetizing the fan. And that's a good way. It's likely that esports team are the first to make an interesting move in that direction.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think that's one advantage, I guess, esports teams tend to have over their sports counterparts, right, is they're more nimble, or they tend to be more nimble, and they can react quicker and make changes quicker. And also, to be honest, which obviously doesn't always end well, but they can take more gambles with decisions as well, sure. Right? For Manchester United or Real Madrid or whoever, the Lakers, to make a partnership or launch something new campaign-wise, I imagine it takes some time, whereas most esports teams can get there a bit faster.
Yeah, and also when you have your model that is generating hundreds of millions in revenue, you don't put energy and focus to completely change that model because it's working. So you don't need to. Some of the very smart and some think ahead and make the move before others, but they don't have to. So when you don't have to, it's likely that you're not doing it. So that's why we see esports moving faster. Indeed.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Right? Romain, possibly one for you here. We might have time for one more after, we'll see. Jonathan has asked, what kind of impact do community-hosted online tournaments have for the esports scene, and can they be compared to smaller tournaments for example, football clubs in terms of the interest they build up for that sport? So how important are, like you mentioned, the League of Legends ecosystem, right, as one example? How important is the grassroots part of that, I guess?
They're really important. So grassroots, exactly as you said, also called organized play internally. We have, once again, a whole department just for organized play and to deal with this one, because we have such deep and crowded ecosystem for League of Legends. We have to be careful not to have like two big tournaments happening the same week. So we control a lot what can be a community organized tournament or not. We also have to be careful when brands decide to enter the ecosystem, but they try to go a bit rogue, you know. So rather than sitting down with us around the negotiation table trying to understand how we could create something together, they would try to organize a community hosted tournament, but it's actually a brand behind it. So we've been doing that for like 8 years now. So we are really careful to make sure community is able to organize their own tournament. Brand works with us to be properly included in the ecosystem, and we have to make sure it doesn't matter if you're a casual player, a hardcore player, a future pro, or just someone who likes to play on Sunday. Everyone needs to have a bit of access to esport, to competitive gaming. It's really important, and I think the European League is extremely strong on the international stage, and it's mostly because each country has been able to nurture their own scene with their own pro players. We have a German league, Polish league, French league, Portuguese league, and all those leagues connect then to the main European league, and then this league connects to the international league and so on. We have university league, we have league below it. So yeah, it's a deep ecosystem. Community is crucial for it to survive and to exist.
Yeah, and it's aspirational, right? Ultimately, and it's also access. I think it's that talking about this recently on another session. That access is arguably the biggest opportunity in esports, but also the biggest challenge, right? It's like if I want to go outside and play football, easy. If I want to go play tennis, a little bit harder because you need the court, you need the racket. Obviously, a lot of people are in a position where they do have a setup where they can play these games at home. And that's why mobile esports, for example, is going to grow and grow because it's more accessible. But I think, I guess that's one question, right? Like Nico with Vitality, with the VHive venues as well, and localized venues are so needed and so important for that, like the access part. Do we have time for one more question? Let's see if we're very, very quick. Esports are continuously trying to have similar standards to sports in terms of training. Nico, just a very quick one for you, mate. You're gonna have to keep it short and sharp. Is there a way to measure the efficiency of those practices to justify the investment? So you talked a little bit to that earlier, but it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's interesting because you might think that playing video games and being on computers makes all of our players very attached to data and statistics, but it's not the case. That's not what we've seen. They have an intuitive understanding of what's good or not, and that's part of being talented at something. You just know how to be good, and you have that in you. Then you can work and develop that skill. But yeah, so they have that intuitive approach most of the time. But we've remarked that confronting them with cold hard data, cold hard fact that, for example, in League of Legends, a player can be convinced that he's super good at specific kind of play style, but we can show them that in practice, it's working. It's not working as well as he thinks, and another playstyle works better. You see, an approach as simple as that, that was the first layer every team implemented in the last few years, and that already drastically changed the approach because the player didn't rely at this data approach at all. But I think that can be completely compared to what happened in sport. A lot of coaches even have an intuitive understanding of the way to perform, what's the best way to win at football, but data showed that NBA is the better example. For example, we see that now everyone shoots more and more three-pointers because it's just a more efficient way to play the game, but that came through data analysis, and a lot of coaches had to admit and remark that's the best way to play the game. And in esports, we are exactly in that phase also where we start to change the mindset and the way we train and the way we actually play the games. But interestingly enough, we are not more advanced that sports at this data analysis and implementation into the performance. So it's super interesting to realize that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there's a really interesting as well I'm sure you can access it outside. For those in the UK, there was a BBC iPlayer documentary recently on Excel, who are one of the teams that Vitality compete against in the LEC, and Excel are the team that are based here in Twickenham. There's I think it was like 6 parts series on their spring split quite recently, and was like very in depth in the team's day to day and such. And it was narrated for some reason by Cillian Murphy, which is quite cool. But it was a good watch. But anyway, I think that is all we have time for. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Sorry to those whose questions we didn't get to. I realised there were quite a few. I'm sure you can reach out to Hannah, to Romain, to Magnus, and to Nico on LinkedIn and such. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'll throw it back to Micheline, I believe, at SPORTEL. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hi. So it brings us back to Monaco. Thank you, Sam. That was a technical glitch, I think, but hey, anyway, thanks, and welcome back to Monaco. Thank you, Sam, Hannah, Romain, and Nicolas, and Magnus for this engaging and insightful session. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and I have some good news, because it's not over yet. There's more to come. Next up, we'll be moving on to session 2 on broadcast and production opportunities in esports. So enjoy a quick break, have a cup of coffee, or maybe even something stronger. And I thank you so much for watching. My colleague Agnes will be back with you for session number 2. So for me, it's bye for now. Bye.
champions! Donnez un applaudissement pour les Miss vice-premières! Quel exploit!
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Agnès, and I'm the press director of SPORTEL. I will guide you through this second session today. You just watched a throwback to the League of Legends French Championship final that took place during SPORTEL Awards in October 2020. We are very, very proud to host once again the 2021 final during SPORTEL Awards on October 4th. So save the date and stay tuned. Let's go back to eTALKS now. Welcome back to the participants who were there for session 1, and welcome to you who's just jumped in for session 2. In case you missed session 1, don't worry, it will be soon available on VOD. The second session of the day will talk about opportunities in esports for broadcast and production. So please stay with us. During the session, you can follow us on our social media and tag us by using the hashtag eTalks. I'll quickly remind you the housekeeping rules. First of all, you can use the chat box to share your comments. For example, you can tell us your company name. On the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you can select who can see your message. And don't forget to switch to panelists and attendees if you want to share your message with everyone. Any questions for our panelists should go in the Q&A tab, and please do not put them in the chat box. You can also upvote any existing questions if you want to hear them answered live at the end of the session. Before starting the second panel, let's do a quick poll to see if you're all awake and ready for session 2. So the second poll today is, are you planning to attend SPORTEL Monaco in October? Yes, of course, you're planning to attend. No, or maybe. You have about 3 more seconds to reply. So let's see what are the answers today. So you're about 52% of you are planning to attend SPORTEL Monaco. 17% said no, and 30% said maybe. Well, you still have time to change your mind because registration will open on May 3rd. Thank you for participating, and we'll start session 2 now. For that, I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful moderator, Kirsty Endfield, who is founder and director at Swipe Right PR. Kirsty, over to you after this short clip.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kirsty. I'm the founder and director of Swipe Right PR. We are the leading communications agency for esports and video games, and we look after some of the biggest brands in the industry, including Red Bull, PUBG Mobile, Team Vitality, and many, many more. Today, we'll be discussing opportunities in esports for broadcast and production. The industry's continued growth, global and young audiences have long made it attractive to brands and broadcasters, but in many ways, 2020 shone a new light on its potential as it filled the gap left by sports. So here to discuss this in more detail is Ethan, the CEO and co-founder of SKYBOX, Nigel, the business development and sports right executive for the BBC, Alexander, the VP of distribution and programming for Blast, and Remer, the head of esports for NEWZOO. Welcome, gentlemen. Hope you're all doing very, very well. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I think it'd be good to find out a little bit more about each of you. So perhaps, Remer, can you kick us off with an introduction on who you are and what you do? And I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I sometimes double mute myself. Sure, yeah. So I'm the head of esports at NEWZOO. We are the leading market intelligence firm when it comes to games and esports. In my capacity here, I pretty much work on all of our esports products as well as any of our custom consulting work that we do to try and help clients get a better understanding of the market or find a good way to approach it. Further background on me, prior to this, I spent 4 years at RIOT Games working on the league management team where I led the project to kind of transition the EULCS into the LEC in its new structure.
Excellent, thank you. Alexander?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Alexander. I'm VP of distribution at Blast, which means that I look after the global media rights, TV rights, online rights, betting. I look after in-flight and theatrical. And in case you don't know Blast, we are a global esports network delivering world-class entertainment. Among others, we have the Blast Premier franchise, which is the leading CSGO franchise in esports.
Lovely, thank you. Nigel, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nigel Crow. I'm the esports lead for the BBC. And in the past 12 months, we've worked with Alexander's team on Blast Premier CSGO. We've worked with the Rocket League. We've worked with UKLC and Riot, and also with EA on FIFA 21. And we're constantly looking for new esports opportunities.
Perfect. And finally, Ethan.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm the CEO and co-founder of SKYBOX. SKYBOX Technologies, what we do is we create software and optimize game environments for spectating and analysis rather than playing. So a little bit counterintuitive, but very useful for games, especially from a point of view perspective, such as Counter-Strike, which is the game title that we're currently within. The software gets used by all the major tournaments and the top teams, and actually soon we're distributing it on Steam via Steam to the general player base as well, so they use it for analysis purposes. Myself, I've worked in mobile game development prior and general tech, different tech companies and projects.
Excellent, thank you so much. Great. Well, I think let's dive into our questions. So to start with, I think it'd be good to have a little bit of context around what happened in 2020 in terms of viewership, audience figures. So Remer, what can you tell us? What were the results from 2020?
Sure. Yeah. So if you look at the broader streaming market, what you would find is a massive explosion in terms of influencer viewing, in terms of Twitch hours, YouTube hours, all of that, right? Pretty much from the moment that lockdown orders started, all of these numbers went through the roof. But if you look at the actual hours watched on Twitch and YouTube, which just for clarity, these are the numbers I have, the platforms I have these numbers for, you would think nothing happened. So in 2019, we saw growth of about 13%. In 2020, we saw growth of about 12.5%, right? Now, the reason for that is that you kind of had a very interesting set of mixed effects on esports. So ecosystems that were kind of more regional based and could pivot quickly, like League of Legends, have had banner years, and I think we've seen that. But Counter-Strike, for example, which is another major viewership driver in the industry, did have to suddenly figure out how they were going to reapproach their ecosystem. They used to be kind of a global international tournaments constantly, and suddenly you're moving to these regional formats, and travel restrictions make it more challenging. Dota, which is the other of the big three esports, kind of disappeared, right? They canceled the whole back half of their season. So these big ticket events that would typically be some of the most important viewership drivers for the industry disappeared, right? So that's gonna hurt the hours watched for the ecosystem. At the same time, what you did have, which was very exciting, was some of the rise in mobile in like Southeast Asia and India, right? Where suddenly you have new viewership drivers exploding with massive hours watched coming from titles that, you know, some of us in the West may not have even heard of, right? So we went and did a review of the top game esports titles in terms of hours watched for 2020. And well, 1, 2, and 3 remain League of Legends, Counter-Strike, and Dota. 4 through 7 were all mobile titles like Mobile Legends Bang Bang, Arena of Valor, Garena Free Fire, and PUBG Mobile, of course. So what you've actually seen is kind of an interesting mix effect of losing some of these big drivers in some areas, some of the more stable ecosystems getting more than they ever have, and then new entrants coming in, right? And the end result is standard growth, essentially. So it's been interesting.
Awesome, thank you. And I think one of the outside of the growth of mobile esports, there was a lot of talk around the growth of sim racing, around sort of those sort of crossover games when it came to sort of sports simulation. And I think that's where, for Nigel, Ethan, Alexander, I'd like to get your take on, I suppose, that narrative that we saw so much through 2020 about how esports was filling the void. And we found that a lot of celebrities, racing drivers, they were all turning to esports to figure out new ways to engage with fans. Some would argue, I would also argue, that crossover has always been there between sports and esports. But how much was that heightened last year? Maybe Alexander, I can throw to you.
Sure. Well, from our experience, I think what happened is that at the start of the lockdown, all forms of traditional sports and entertainment were kind of like put on hold. So traditional linear TV stations that would be broadcasting traditional sports, there was no more football, no more handball, no more swimming, no more anything really. The same phenomenon was true for the betting companies, where there was nothing to bet on. And then if you look at the audience, there wasn't that much to watch. So there was nothing to watch, nothing to talk about, nothing to bet on. And at the same time, that audience was confined to their homes. So you had a situation where you had an audience sitting at home, hungry for content, which in many ways didn't exist as far as traditional sports was concerned. And then you had an interesting phenomena as far as esports and the crossover of traditional and esports was concerned. So as far as traditional sports started, we could witness phenomena like Formula One drivers going online, doing esports. We had a couple of famous footballers, Gareth Bale, doing FIFA tournaments, but these were mostly, I would say, for entertainment purposes. This wasn't really competitive esports. And then you had companies like us and our colleagues and competitors who were already in that space of competitive esports, who were looking at an audience that was hungry for more. And as a result of that, we increased our output, and we also increased our viewership. So last year, we experienced peaks in terms of viewerships. We set new records, and overall, for us, that crisis of viewership for others, for us, it actually provided an opportunity.
Excellent. Ethan, I know that you've been very focused on the CSGO scene, but anything to add in sort of that heightened connection between sports and esports?
Yeah, I mean, it leads a little bit into our product really about, you know, how esports can be explained from a sports perspective, and also, you know, borrowing some of the stuff that the sports already does. But I would say that kind of like what was already touched on as well. I mean, the amount of time people have on their hands now to explore these types of things. You know, I think this is where the crossover you're talking with the celebrities coming on and the sports stars, and really taking it a bit more seriously as a viable option to explore and engage. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I used to play basketball all the time, go home and play NBA live. You know, that was how it worked. And I could see that happening, you know, now just more in the professional scene and from a celebrity point of view. And I think hopefully that remains past pandemic as well. I think it's really great engagement mechanism.
Just to tack one additional thought on, I mean, I think one of the very cool things that you saw with this kind of heightened connection is literally the fact that all of these sports organizations sped up any esports plans they have. I mean, I think all sports organizations to some degree have some idea of like, we want to engage in esports somehow, but when they suddenly couldn't put on their main events, pretty much everyone just started experimenting, right? And I think that is a very literal heightened connection between traditional sports organizations and esports, right? Maybe not necessarily underlying sports, but that connection increased. And I think what you're going to see is that a lot of these organizations are going to take learnings away from that, right? Because not all of these were successful. Some of them were very successful. Some of them were not as successful, but they've all learned something from it. And so I think that you're also going to see an acceleration of the blending of sports and esports from these key players having gotten hands-on experience in the space.
I think, yeah, I mean, also just to add there, here in Denmark, you know, the amount of sports clubs now that are investigating, like the amateur sports scene here, the amount they're investigating now esports and actually coming and asking, how do we do this? How do we set up a program? Because kids still need to be entertained, and you know, this is really becoming more of a viable option for them. And from what I can understand, it's also being quite successful, you know, so this is going to drive a lot of this crossover.
Nigel, I'd like to throw to you next. I'd love to get a broadcaster's perspective. So having worked with the BBC for a number of years, and you know, we collaborated when the League of Legends World Championship came back to the UK for the quarterfinals years and years ago, and the BBC was sort of front and center then. And then over the years, you guys you've continuously increased the amount of content that you're putting out, whether that's on iPlayer, BBC Three. Sam Cooke mentioned the Excel Esports documentary, and then obviously your recent partnership with Blast as well. So it'd be good to understand if you felt that there was a need for a heightened connection in 2020, but also, I suppose, just your long-term goals, whether that is just part of your ongoing strategy.
I think esports is something that the BBC has been looking at for a very long time, and the main statistic that has made it so important for me is just seeing that gaming in the UK is bigger than video and music combined. And that is a massive market, and it means that we have to get involved, because if that's where our audience and our future audiences are interested, then we have to go there as well. One of the things that it was, vital for it, as Alexander said, was that it was the live aspect that was fantastic about esports during that period, because it meant that there was something that could be done that was slightly different. We were showing a lot of documentaries again. We were showing classic matches, which are fantastic, but they're very, very much in the past and not necessarily appealing to a younger audience. So that was fantastic for us in terms of the esports teams. And then in terms of what we're looking at and our plans, we're looking at UK-centric events, but we're also looking at elite events. And that was one of the attractions of Blast Premier, because they were offering us elite teams. And then with the UKLC, we were being offered UK grassroots, which is something that we're very passionate about supporting. So the great thing about esports is that there's so many different types of esports and so many different types of levels that we can look at it that way, and we can get involved in all of them, hopefully.
I think it's fantastic to see the BBC tapping into grassroots ecosystems. It's so rare, and most of that content always centers around the really pro level competition. I'd love to also find out from your point of view, because I know there's a lot of people that you've got that make the decisions within the BBC to get this content aired. How did it affect credibility within your organization, Nigel?
Well, I think everyone's very interested in esports, and they know a little bit about esports. They mostly heard about League of Legends World Championships, and there's a little bit of education that needs to go on, I think, in every organization, media or otherwise, sponsors, you name it, about esports and what actually esports means. And we've seen today in this panel and in other panels that esports is different games, which people might not realize. I think having elite esports being offered to us and really, really top level production teams, which really worked well with us, like Alexander's, it really, really helped improve the offering that we were pitching internally and externally. So that was something that was a real pleasant surprise, I think, for everybody, was just how professional all the organizations we've dealt with, whether it was DreamHack, ESL or Blast or Psyonix, they've all been really, really top level. And then that only bodes well for the future when we can hopefully do more events.
Excellent. And Alexander, what's your take on the credibility of the industry? Have you seen a huge influx of partnership requests?
Yeah, I think credibility was probably never, or for the past 2 years, not so much an issue. We have obviously the BBC, and I said that to Nigel and Friday, I'd be happy to repeat it here, is the standard bearer of broadcast globally, and just being there had a knock-on effect on other conversations. But if I look back before we teamed up with the BBC, that credibility element was already there. We had a wide distribution with major TV channels and leading brands. We have pretty good viewership globally. So people and buyers knew that esports is quite relevant. What the absence of traditional sports provided during last year was for key industry players such as Nigel and others and gatekeepers to maybe take a closer look if previously they had been on the fence. So it gave a chance to commissioners and buyers of traditional TV channels to have another look at esports, or have a first look at esports. It gave a chance to brands to take another look, because we were active, we continue to be live, we continue to provide that inventory that brands could display against. So I think that there wasn't really that much need for credibility, but there was certainly an enormous amount of attention from which we benefited because simply there wasn't that much elsewhere to look. So that was, I think, one of the great benefits that the esports industry received, especially when speaking to buyers and commissioners who also deal with traditional sports or other content altogether.
Excellent. And Remer, I could see you nodding. So anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about the credibility question, and I feel like, you know, COVID has been, I think, very impactful in very specific circumstances. I think the fact that all of these sports organizations, which many of whom were trying to, not all, but many were sort of trying to avoid esports, suddenly pivoted to trying it, you know, like very quickly. In that sense, you had meaningful credibility. But I also think back to how this has been such a big process. If I, you know, when I first started working in the industry and I told people I worked in esports, they would go, oh, EA Sports, FIFA, not quite. But I mean, FIFA is an esport, but it's not the same, right? But this transition has happened, I would say, over the last 6 years. You could think, you know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, the only sponsors in the industry were peripheral manufacturers, right? People who made gaming keyboards, and often the sponsorships were, you get some keyboards and some mice, now put our name on the jersey, right? And then you think, even before COVID, 2 years ago, you had the Louis Vuitton integration with Riot for the World Championship, right? Now you have a high fashion brand doing IP blending with a video game, so around an esports event, right? And so when you look at that transition, a lot of this credibility has been established. I think what COVID's unlocked has been maybe certain targeted credibility and forcing some holdouts to acknowledge that esports is a thing that needs to be reckoned with. But I would say a lot of that credibility has been there.
Excellent. And Ethan also nodding. So I'm going to throw it to you if you've got anything to add.
No, I think it's just good points.
Okay, good. I like that we're all aligned. That's nice. It's positive. So Alexander, you were talking a little bit about sort of the need to pivot last year, and I know that I was looking through some of the content that you guys were putting out from 2020, and you said that you generated over 500 hours of content, which is incredibly impressive given the climate. So how difficult was that? How difficult was it to just make everything online?
Yeah. Well, Blast is known and originally for putting on amazing physical events that provide great entertainment value for the people who go to the arenas. So we fill arenas. When it's not COVID, we fill arenas globally. Moscow, Sao Paulo, Copenhagen, LA, 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 spectators. But at any given time, that audience in the arena has always been just a tiny fraction of what we've been doing on TV and online anyhow. So the vast majority, I don't have the percentage, but it must be over probably 99, has always been online. So the question that we faced when the physical events weren't really possible wasn't so much how do we create, how do we go online, because we were already there. So what we tried to do and the challenge that we faced is how do we replicate that arena experience that we transport to homes, online or on linear TV? How do we do that? And there were a number of challenges that maybe I can just rattle off a few just to illustrate what we were dealing with. So it was things like staff working remotely across different countries and time zones because we couldn't get them together. The distribution team taking care after the broadcasters, the production team, the social media team, and so on. Perhaps more importantly, the players and the teams weren't in one space. So we had teams competing that not only were they not in the same space, the individual team members were not in the same space as their teammates. And that across a number of countries, which obviously provided a number of challenges, technological among them. Then we needed to communicate with presenters, with analysts, with casters. We needed to integrate the arena experience by replicating fan cams and that sort of thing. We had to send out production kits to talent, cameras, backdrops, lights. So the list is really very long. I think one fact that I memorized just to illustrate how deep that technical integration really was, we had 550 external IP video feeds as opposed to our standard 26. So it was times 20 of what we normally do, just in order to try and get a great online experience. And I think it's fair to say to some degree that the results and the viewership that we have received made it worthwhile, and in some way we hope to have pushed the standard of what online entertainment means. But at the same time, we've also kind of taken a liking to online to some degree. So in 2021, you will see some online tournaments that we do simply because we had a great experience with that in 2020. But of course, we'll as soon as possible return to offline as well.
Excellent. And very quick follow-up question for you. You obviously the BBC partnership was obviously fantastic, but for Blast Pro you also streamed on Twitch and YouTube. So what is the value of being cross-platform? What is the value of still having a linear broadcast partner?
Right. Well, that duality has been our strategy really from day one. When we started out. So Blast today has about 35 plus partners that roughly divide into TV and OTT on the one hand, and then online on the other. And in combination, we reach 150 TV territories, and we broadcast in 17 languages. So why the two? Why not just focus on one of the two? And here I just maybe start with TV. On the TV side, we are, generally speaking, we are looking at 4 different partners. We have general entertainment channels, we have public broadcasters such as the BBC, traditional sports channels, and then we have bespoke esports channels as our partners. So TV2 in Denmark, Globo in Brazil, Astro in Southeast Asia, the BBC, DAZN as an OTT example. And perhaps I can say that the target audience is slightly older than the one that's online, maybe new to esports or newer to esports, and is approached by us accordingly, so that there's more of a leaning back experience, and that we provide our partners with the tools to entertain that audience in the best possible way. For us as Blast, the benefit of that is it allows us to complete the market penetration and also to reach an additional audience. And from the benefit from the TV side, so Nigel will be better placed to speak to that, but perhaps to complement a rights portfolio with a younger proposition. Nigel referenced how big competitive gaming is, so that's something that wouldn't be overlooked. So that's TV. And then on quickly to finish on the online side, online, nobody will dispute that it's the natural home of esports. It's the authentic place where endemics feel at home. For us, it allows us a massive global viewership and a global reach. There isn't any gatekeeper. We can just broadcast ourselves. We can cooperate with major streamers and major companies that operate in the sphere. So when we combine the two of linear TV and online, that strategy for us creates maximum reach. It creates maximum exposure. And then, of course, there's a revenue factor on both of these TV and online that we can't ignore and that we seek as a company.
Thank you. And Nigel, I will throw you a question shortly around, I suppose, some production learnings. But first of all, I want to come head over to Ethan. I have a question just regarding an interview that you ran back in 2019, and you were talking about the limitations of broadcasting and spectating, and specifically within CSGO. And I think it's your co-founder, who's also a pro CSGO commentator, Anders Blom. He was talking about the limitations of how accessible a game like Counter-Strike can be. And this also links back to what Remer was saying around, how those numbers almost reduced a little bit, how that viewership reduced because there are those limitations. I'd love to find out how that, from your perspective, has changed over the last few years. How much easier is it for anyone to understand esports, to get involved with the industry?
Yeah, I mean, tough question. It's in the sense there's a lot more content now since that interview 2 years ago, because also there's of course, a lot more non-player fans, or at least people trying to get into, the esports fan base. And if you, for example, are not a player of CSGO and try and follow a match, I'm not sure how many people out there have done that, but it is pretty hectic and pretty difficult, because you're just switching between the point of view of players. So we make like an analogy here at SKYBOX. So you can imagine trying to watch a football match and all you can do is see through the eyes of the players, and just switching between those. But then, you throw another 5 balls on the field, and then try and follow that, so it's difficult, so it means that there's a real need for content, whether that be via streamers, or whether it be through broadcast, whatever, to make that barrier to entry lower and lower and lower. Hence, that was the part of the motivation for founding for SKYBOX and developing the technology that we've developed. I can only speak from a CSGO point of view, really, to tell you the truth. MOBA games, which more viewed from the top view, they're easier to follow with what's happening in the team environment, but also there's a lot of stuff going on in a MOBA game that you need to kind of understand, how the powers of each character and so forth. And from a CSGO perspective, it's inherently really hard to understand a meta game if you're not a player. And that's really like the strategic element of CSGO and how well these teams are actually communicating and working together and so forth. So what I've really enjoyed seeing, not to kind of toot our own horn or whatever, is analysts like Sponge or DDK and so forth using SKYBOX to zoom out on the maps, to make the parent, to do quick rewinds of gameplay and so forth, and then just break it down and show what is happening. And funnily enough, I've learned, I'm not a good CS player by any means, so often this like next level of CS, which is that strategic level, I'm not versed in it. So I've actually learned a lot by seeing these kind of guys break down matches. And I think, the more that we see esports across, like, say, linear channels and so forth, the more need we have for this type of content, where it will engage the player because they're learning about, so the player that's also fans, they're learning about gameplay at that level, and also the non-player because they get to really be engaged with this, with the game at a new level that can't really be understood by just a standard broadcast.
I've been working in the industry for over a decade, and I still struggle with the League and Dota. But CS:GO, I feel like the way, well, for any game, the more you watch it, the more that you actually just take on board what the commentators are saying. And the commentators, especially for CS:GO, they really, really help that story. So for me, not being the best gamer, I actually find it much easier now to watch a lot of the content out there. And I suppose, Nigel, from your perspective, when it comes to the BBC audience, like how difficult is it? And you've done a lot within the league scene, but how difficult is it to have your BBC audience understand League of Legends? I can imagine that crossover might not necessarily be there.
Well, what we do with each new esport for us is we put together an explainer by experts. So we had that done for League of Legends, we had that done for CSGO, and we have that permanently on our website. And then that really helps. And then we also, on our pages where the audience will be going to, that is one of the things, whether when they first arrive or while they're waiting for a match to start, so they could see it there. So there's always that ability to onboard people. It is a bit of an issue, but I think that all audiences that do come to esports are genuinely interested and they want to learn, whether it's a lot or not very much. So I think a lot of teams have given a lot of audience members have given esports the benefit of the doubt, and it just depends on the quality of the feed and what's being shown there to make sure that the audience stays. I think you're quite right, though. The commentary is absolutely vital in terms of keeping people interested and helping out and striking the right tone. And on the whole, I think esports does that very, very well. But of course, once it gets too technical, it is more difficult for a newer audience to understand.
And from a production point of view, what has the BBC sort of taken anything away from the last year, but from esports in general, in terms of how you're producing your content, how you're broadcasting it?
I think what's interesting about the esports world is that it seems to me personally to be very much based on the American style of presentation and having those kind of boards and people standing around and talking about things with headsets on. And I think that's very interesting. So that was a surprise to me that hasn't really changed so much even during the COVID period. But in terms of the actual production itself, it's just very high quality. All of these teams and all of these publishers have got people in from outside of esports, and the esports teams and the esports publishers are really, really upping their game. And so it's most of the events that we've dealt with, because we've been dealing with top level organizations like ESL and Blast, we didn't really notice much of a difference. And the great thing is they're very, very open to discussion and tweaks, and that really helped us as well. So that was just fantastic for us.
And continuing on with the sort of production vein, so from in terms of sort of esports content, you can pretty much watch it when you want, wherever you want. It's super, super accessible. So what, in terms of that level of accessibility, what is it that sports can learn? What can sports take away? Remer, I haven't heard from you for a little while. Don't know if you've got any insights there.
I would look for my insights. It would be almost more from a business perspective and the challenges around that, right? I think that coming more from the endemic esports side of things, we often look to a degree with envy at the success that traditional sports has had in monetizing its access to its events, right? And whether it's through paid television and various paywalls. So there is a pretty significant trade-off, right? Because esports, when it comes to revenue streams, the media rights revenue stream is significantly underdeveloped compared to, on balance, to, let's say, sponsorship compared to traditional sports, right, where it's one of the strongest revenue streams. So this is a pretty significant trade-off for the industry. From a fan experience, of course, I think that, in terms of acquisition, and especially younger audiences, having this free approach is the only way to make it work, especially when your audience is primarily young and digital, which I know is an audience that sports wants to capture more of, right? And so in that sense, most of our fans do not necessarily even have a TV, like a linear TV subscription, right? They're used to doing everything digitally on their phone, on their computer, right? And so long as there is no access, it is a challenge around acquiring some of the younger generation to the product.
And Ethan, from a SKYBOX point of view, what was it that you borrowed from traditional sports in terms of how CSGO is presented? And do you think in a way that esports can almost be a blueprint for sports OTT platforms?
Yeah, I mean, like, basically the whole SKYBOX 3D universe is modeled from traditional sports, so we just looked at how do you spectate and learn about a sport. And I think, I could go to not understand soccer or football and go to a match and pretty quickly I could figure it out, kind of what's going on and so forth. I think it's a much higher barrier in esports. So what we did is we just said, okay, well, let's recreate basically the game environment so it's optimized for spectating and analysis, meaning that you can zoom out anywhere, you can view from any angles, you can make things disappear if they're obstructing your view, you can do instant replays, you've got the telestrator to draw on and telecast draw on and telecast, whatever it is to draw with, and all these types of things. So basically a huge majority of it was borrowed from traditional sports. And regarding the OTT thing for sports in general, that I can't answer. I think I don't know the sports audience well enough to say, you know, whether they would be interested or how interested they are in, you know, these kind of more customized ways of viewing content. But certainly there could be an idea there. I mean, maybe Nigel has got a better idea than I have around that part.
I'll throw that to either Nigel or Alexander, if you have any thoughts around whether esports could be that blueprint.
Yeah, I think esports really is at an interesting crossroads in terms of what it is and the brightness and the vividness of it all and what it offers to the viewers. I think it's in a great place at the moment, and I think with VR and AR, I think that's when traditional sports will definitely be getting worried on a serious level. But at the moment, just all the different ways of analyzing it and looking at it, and the way that there's different ways of being able to replay things and add loot boxes and add skins and things like that, it's really going to only help the esports develop more and monetize more, I think.
Excellent. Alexander, any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think it's not an either/or question. I think both learn from each other. And as Nigel referenced a couple of minutes ago, there's a lot of things in production where esports was looking to traditional sports. How is a Champions League doing it? What does a production package other than a live stream look like? What other kind of assets do we need to provide for this to be competitive with rowing, swimming, football, rugby, whatever it may be when that purchase decision is being made? And now when we look at, you asked about OTT and to what degree can OTTs learn from esports. I'm not sure which way around it's going to be, because there's some great things about OTTs and especially the monetization that Remer already referenced, that are quite enviable coming from the world of esports. So what I think in that regard is that what's already been done by traditional sports OTT players, which is quite clever, is that they take the immediacy of social media. You have immediately after any football match or boxing match or whatever it might be, you have the highlights, you have summaries on Twitter, you have interviews almost instantly. If you look at, for example, what the UFC is doing, which is running very successful OTT, you have free fights on YouTube. And then in the longer run, I think we're witnessing a trend where traditional sports are moving over, at least to some degree and to a very interesting degree, to the likes of YouTube and Twitch. So we've seen that across baseball, football, Formula One, La Liga, basketball. And what they're doing is, at the moment, they're just dipping their feet into the water, but they're looking for new audiences, younger audiences, and a direct engagement with fans on a global level, which, being on Twitch, obviously allows you. They have certain functionalities such as squad streaming, which is interesting, and of course any rights holder on social media isn't confined by a territory or a paywall. So I think what we see is that from an OTT point of view, that the main event is to a very large degree still protected by that paywall that you have to pay in order to get access to. But then when it comes to a secondary exploitation, that Twitch and YouTube are very popular as sort of like testing grounds in order to engage with a wider audience and to get fans back into their OTT universe.
And that's mostly because it's just it's just not passive viewing, right? Like you can share emotes, you can chat to the community on Twitch, on YouTube, wherever. So that level of, I think that level of engagement is very, very unique to esports. And I think something that the industry does incredibly well is our ability to pivot according to what the community actually says as well. Like we're completely on top of anything that they're saying on socials. it's instantly reactive. They're instantly responded to, and I think that is something that is relatively unique to us. I appreciate things are changing for other industries, but it's something that we've managed to do very, very well. So in terms of how we adapt to those changing patterns, like how do we manage that? Like how instant can we be, and how much value does that have for other industries looking in as well? Maybe Remer, you can talk a little bit more around sort of those kind of changing patterns.
Yeah, sure. I think you touched on a really great thing there. I forget who said this originally, but someone had said once, esports is a conversation, right? And I think that's a really good way of putting it. I think a lot of traditional broadcasts and linear mediums come from this era of you are presenting someone to the people. But when it comes to our relationship with our audiences, it is entirely conversational, right? And it's either direct, immediate in Twitch and in the way they interact with their streamers and influencers, but it's also on Twitter, right? And stars and like key personalities are interacting directly with fans on Twitter, on social media. The producers are like scanning those subreddits of the games that they're involved in and Twitter to see what fans are thinking, and they're adapting their strategies accordingly, right? And I think in a way we are, there's some restrictions towards that adaptability. Like you cannot change a season format on the fly, right? That you get one shot at that each year, and then you got to kind of go to the drawing board the next year if it didn't work. But there are a lot of things we can do because we're digital, because we're so heavily influenced on kind of just the digital medium, that we can change, whether it's even all the way down to changing some of the core mechanics of the game or the balancing within the game, right? We can literally go in and change how the game plays if our audience doesn't like that. That is something you can't do with football, really, right? Maybe you could change the size of the football or the goal, but the level of detail and nuance with which we can, as a community, impact the flow of the product we're putting out is incredible, right? And so because we're so digital, we are able to react quickly, and we're able to have this conversation. So I think this is a huge advantage esports has over a lot of other kind of broadcast mediums. And I think it's something that esports is also growing and learning to capitalize and take advantage of in ways to really kind of accelerate the growth that it's had, right?
Perfect. I'm gonna actually quickly jump to an audience question from Ivan, and this goes back to what you were saying, Nigel, around AR and VR. So how the development of augmented reality in video games will impact esports broadcasting. So Nigel, I'll come to you first, just because you picked up on that earlier.
Yeah, I think for me, it's so exciting because it's just more visual. I think, unfortunately, with esports, I mean, I had this image of only seeing a few kind of a table of people behind, massive screens, tapping away furiously at mice at a League of Legends match. And sometimes that is it is very visual. Sometimes it's not. You're very close in on their expressions. But ultimately you can't get away from that very, very stationary image. And I think with AR and VR, there will be the possibility for the actual players to move around and interact with other things. And I think it will look fantastic, both within the game and also without the game. You'll be able to see how difficult it is, and it will be very aspirational, I believe.
Excellent. And Alexander, are we going to see an AR or VR tournament from Blast soon?
Well, I'll pass on that. We have a range of really exciting things coming up, but we typically announce them through our traditional channels. So I'll
sorry, not on here. It's fine. No scoops.
Just to tack on here, it kind of gave me a thought, which is, so once upon a time, many moons ago, I had worked as a stage ref for an esports tournament, which means I was literally standing on stage while the players were playing. And it occurs to me, because, Nigel, you mentioned sort of you just have the guys sitting behind their computers. The best seat in the house is being the stage ref, because you're literally standing over their shoulders, watching them play, literally watching them. It's smaller movements, but it is fascinating to see how they're interacting with their keyboard, with the game, and going between the players. And well, I'm a little less bullish on AR and VR esports, mostly because I've seen them, and at this point, the viewing experience of seeing these guys swinging their hands around on stage has not been, to me, particularly compelling. I do think from there could be interesting innovation from an audience experience perspective, right? Being able to, through OTT offerings, put people in big arenas or where the stage ref would be, and actually getting a more, on a broadcast perspective, getting almost a more hands-on experience of being at that match and the best seats in the house.
And Ethan, from a SKYBOX perspective, has VR or AR ever formed part of your business strategy, something that you're interested in?
Yeah, without doubt. So yeah, you'll be seeing some AR stuff coming up. So I think like the opportunity with AR is what we were talking about before. Is like for broadcasts, breaking down matches and so forth. You can just all of a sudden just interact with it a lot more, and again just make it so much more digestible for anyone, whether you're an expert player or somebody just completely new to the game. So yeah, AR is definitely something interesting. And VR, let's have a look. We'll see down the track.
Okay, no scoops today. That's fine, guys. I'd like to talk a little bit more about sort of the long-term partnership opportunity for esports as well. You know, the last year has been fantastic, but is there actually going to be longer-term gain? Are we going to continue to see that level of momentum? Is it going to die down? I'd love to just get your thoughts around what the next few years look like. What do those partnership opportunities look like in the future? Alexander?
Yeah, with pleasure. I think we're going to see more and more. There'll be an ever-growing cooperation between sports and esports. It started way before last year with sporting clubs investing into esports teams, Schalke, PSG, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Miami Heat. The list is really, really long. And then perhaps something that was really quite remarkable for me to see, at least, was an esports team partnering with a traditional sports team, which was the collaboration between FaZe Clan and Man City. And when that happened, who could really tell who was the bigger beneficiary of that? Because many, myself included, would argue that Man City stood to gain more from that, because FaZe Clan is so big, it's bringing a club that isn't with a sport that isn't number one in America to a huge audience, and I just thought that was a very, very interesting sign of the times of development of cooperation. But in addition to that, you then of course have esports carried by traditional sports broadcasters, to which Nigel already spoke. And then one more perhaps trend that we are seeing more and more and more, also me particularly in the remit that I have for Blast, is the creation of bespoke esports channels by traditional sports channel groups. So one example would be Sport One in Germany, a major sporting channel, which has now created an esports channel, and we see that all across the board. So I think that there's a development there which is probably irreversible. It seems to be working well for everybody involved, and of course it's very beneficial to the industry.
Excellent. Remer, any thoughts? Long-term opportunities?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. I think that we've seen some really, I think that sports and video games as a whole, traditional sports organizations and video games as a whole, are going to have a long relationship. I think one of the things I'd point to is a while back, so this is going to be an American football reference, but SBJ did it most kind of valuable from a pure, like, brand equity and marketing side, players in the NFL. And Juju Smith-Schuster was, I think, number 7 on there. And this is a guy who he's a good player, but he's not top 10 in the league. But what he did do, and he does do a lot, is he streams, he interacts with social media, he plays games, he's very modern and very forward thinking in how he approaches his fan base. And so I think that this is an area where you're going to see a lot of kind of collaboration between sports and gaming and streaming in general, and tournaments that are maybe more influencer driven. Like one of the biggest sim sport events of last year was the La Liga Santander tournament, where La Liga put on an event where they collaborated with Ibai, who's a very popular League of Legends community caster in Spain, and the real football clubs and real players, and had everyone doing a FIFA tournament, right? And so I think this is where you're going to see a lot of growth. I'm expecting is maybe not trying to compete directly with the Counter-Strikes and the Blasts of this world, because I think it's a different fit, but I think you're going to see a lot of opportunity in this sort of influencer driven collaboration, where you're going to see growing brand equity and growing fandom with younger audiences through kind of pro players as influencers and competitive events like that.
Excellent. Ethan, thoughts for long-term opportunities?
Regarding, sorry,
long-term opportunities for esports and for the sports industry, leaning on esports. What does the long-term gain look like?
Yes, I mean, like I can just talk about from the perspective here, as I said, with the kind of more amateur club levels and stuff that we're working with at the moment. I got to see there's a huge demand for it here. For the sports clubs to move into esports, and there's a ginormous waiting list for kids who want to participate in those programs. So I think this is going to be something which follows the value chain up into the Pro League as well, which I think the guys have already touched on pretty much the points there. So.
Perfect. And Nigel, final comments from you. In terms of your content strategy, how much will esports form part of your sports content strategy, if at all?
Well, I hope it will continue. I mean, we're looking, as I said, about the grassroots and the elite esport, and if there are opportunities out there, we'd like to take them. But I think the great thing that we're seeing is that there are new events coming online all the time, and indeed new esports like Valorant, and then there's mobile gaming, which I'm really interested in because I think that's got it's really aspirational but also very connectable. And then if somebody could get some IP that works in esports like Nintendo or Street Fighter, things like that, which have a connection to people outside of esports, I think if they can get that cracked, then that will also be very attractive to broadcasters. So I think the future is very bright, and yeah, we hope to be part of it going forward.
Fantastic. And that is all we have time for. So thank you so much to our speakers, everyone that's listening and attended today. Really great panel. Thank you guys. Very insightful. And Nigel, completely agree on the mobile gaming front as well. So yeah, we should talk. Great. Thank you guys so much and have a really good day.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Back to Monaco now. Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks to all our fantastic panelists, Nigel, Ethan, Alexander, and Remer, for such an inspiring session. We would like to thank you all once again at the eTALKS team for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program and production. Before leaving, please take a few minutes to fill out our short survey that will pop out of your screen when we close the session. And we look forward to seeing you physically live again for SPORTEL Monaco from October 5th to 7th. Thank you again for watching, and see you very soon. Bye.